Oh, that's heavy. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with the books I read in January. So today I thought what we would do is we would go through the books that I read in January. This month I read a total of 3 books, which for me is kind of awesome because I am one of the slowest readers that I know. Put in perspective, my roommate is one of the fastest readers I know, and she read, wait for it, 18 books in 1 month. My brain, I can't. So I thought we would go in and I'd give kind of small, short-ish reviews of kind of what I thought about some of the books that I've read so far. The first 2 books that I read this month, I'm gonna kind of do together because they're both Jane Austen novels, and the fact that I have this giant book with all of her novels in it, I can't really hold this giant thing up the whole time. So this month I read Persuasion and Northanger Abbey. I'm gonna put this down because this thing, I could like lift weights with this thing. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love Jane Austen so much. I love these 2 stories. I just love the plot lines. I love the characters. These 2 have to be equally my second favorite for Jane Austen. I love Pride and Prejudice, but these 2 both are equal and come a very, very close to second. The first one I read was Persuasion. So if you don't know, Persuasion is about a man and a woman who fall in love. The woman is persuaded by a family friend that he doesn't have enough money, so she needs to kind of like let him go. And so she does, and he goes off to his sailor thing, and he comes back 8 years later, and it's awkward. It's awkward. She still loves him, and he still loves her, but they won't admit it at all. I would say my favorite part of Persuasion has got to be the letter that Captain Wentworth writes Anne. That is my favorite thing. I've said it before and I will say it again. That is my favorite thing that Jane Austen has ever written. That passage is absolutely gorgeous. To find a least favorite part of Persuasion is really hard for me because I just love the story so much. Okay, I think I found my least favorite part, which might be because it's Jane Austen's writing style, aka the writing style back in, when she wrote it. When they have moments that you want to hear people talking, you don't read the dialogue. You read a paragraph where they're like, and these things were said and everything is great, and you're like, no, I wanted to read the dialogue where they talked at this certain moment, and now I can't because you just said and now everything is great, and I missed the dialogue in that moment. Thank you, Jane Austen. So that's probably the only bad thing I'm ever gonna say about Jane Austen. Bad me. We're gonna move on. And then on the other hand, there is Northanger Abbey, which is about a girl named Catherine who is very, very young. She has never been out in society. She's only ever lived on her farm, and she has like 0 monies. And so she gets into society, and people think because she's with family friends who have money that she's going to inherit all of this money, and therefore people try to be her friends. And someone wants to marry her brother, and then someone wants to marry her, but she actually likes this other guy, and it's all about miscommunication. With Northanger Abbey, my favorite moment in this book, to coin flip from what I said with Persuasion, this one, when they have their moment, it's not dialogue, but there's a lot more dialogue. And in a paragraph, instead of reading a paragraph of dialogue from X person, you read a paragraph where they're like, this is what he said. But the important parts are still in dialogue form, and it makes those moments so much better, and you can actually read those moments instead of just being like, this moment happened and we're going to move on. And my least favorite part, I don't have one, so I'm going to say the most interesting part. You can take this as least, whatever you want. I believe, do not quote me, but I believe Northanger Abbey was one of the first books that Jane Austen wrote. Again, I believe, I might be wrong. When you look at the way it's written, it's very different because the author is talking to the audience. She's talking about her heroine, and it's really strange because all of a sudden you're in the story and the next minute she's talking to you about the story. And it's kind of like she breaks this 4th wall that usually is never ever broken, and it's really strange compared to all her other writing, because when she does that, because she does do that sometimes in her other writing, it's not as obvious. The third and last book I read in the month of January is Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. It's about a guy who lives in the 1700s England, and he's bi. The main character, Monty, is in love with his best friend, Percy, and they go on this big tour of England right before he's going to have to take over his father's land, and his best friend is going to have to go to Harvard. And his younger sister, Felicity, tags along. What you think is going to be summer of pining after best friend and going to all these gambling halls and getting drunk and all this stuff turns into a huge adventure story. There are pirates, there are highwaymen, they go on an adventure to random parts of the place that you never would have thought someone would go to, because he was never supposed to go to places like Spain, but he ended up going to Spain anyway. It was very good. I very much enjoyed it, but I had moments where I had to stop because it got kind of tedious and kind of boring in the in-between times. This book I started, I want to say like September, because this came in my Owl Crate. It was the very first Owl Crate I got. It was the July Owl Crate. I was super excited about it. I couldn't wait to read it, and I started reading it, and it was very, very good. And then Y'all Fest came along. And then Kiera Cass, the person who wrote the selection series, was supposed to be at Y'all Fest, or so I was told. So I stopped this book and started reading the selection series because I wanted to read them all before I went up to her. I mean, how weird would it be to be like, hello, I'm a huge fan of yours. I've never read your books, but I own all of them. Will you sign them? That's weird. And then I found out, guess what? She's not going to be there. So I finished those and I put those down and I read other things and I did other things and I started reading it again. It was very enjoyable. It very, very much was. But what I will say is the one thing that stumped me, I love reading dialogue. When I look at a book, I look at the cover, I read the synopsis, and I flip through it to see what the pages look like. If there's a lot of dialogue, I'm probably gonna get it. This had a lot of dialogue. It did. In between the pockets of action is the awkward we're traveling time. I downloaded the audiobook and I said, you know what? You're gonna finish this. And I did. And I very much enjoyed the story. It's got a lot of twists and turns in here I never would have thought of. The fact that this is an adventure novel never crossed my mind. Even though in the little thingy that she gave to Owl Crate, it says that she loved writing about pirates and highwaymen, and she's super excited she gave them in this book. I'm oblivious. Anyway, regardless of the fact that it took me forever to get through this book, I very much liked this book. My favorite part of this book, the character of Monty, is so complex. The fact that he's in England and he's bi and he's in love with a dude, and that's a huge no-no in that society. Just basically all of these things that make him him, that he is much more complex than this jerk that I've always thought he was. And I loved that. My least favorite thing about this book, I think I already kind of talked about, which was the in-between action parts that were just kind of boring for me. It was just hard to pick it back up. So for me, the audiobook really helped. So that is all I have for you guys today. Those are the books that I read in the month of January. I have goals set in my mind for what's happening in February, so hopefully the number will bump up even just by one book. Fingers crossed. I have faith. Maybe. What are some of the books that you read this month? Did you like any of the books that I read this month? I would love to know what you guys think. Thank you for coming to the end of my video. I really appreciate you sticking around, and I hope to see you guys next week. Bye!